Okay, we're on.
Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Pamela Kane and I'm the music director here at St. Gregory the Great Catholic Church in Bluffton, South Carolina. And I'm going to do a series of programs called Get Organized. I think it's interesting for people to learn about the organ, which they hear from the choir loft, but never really get to experience up close and personal. So what I thought I would do is introduce you to some of the interesting things about the organ, and then I would play a piece that most of you probably would know, and that would be something that I think you'll be able to follow me for the next couple of weeks, and I'll introduce you to different repertoire of the organ. Today, you're going to get to hear probably the most iconic piece for the organ, Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. But before that, let's be like Mr. Rogers. The first thing I'm going to do is change my shoes. You know how Mr. Rogers would come in and he would put on his sneakers? So I'm going to take off my regular street shoes and I'm going to put on my organ shoes. They are called Organ Master, and the reason we have to wear special shoes when we play the organ is because there's a keyboard for our feet. And the shoes have to have a soft sole, a heel, sort of like the Mary Janes. So the shoes go on first. I've already turned on the organ and the light, and I'll have you notice a few things about the organ. This particular organ is 3 manuals for your hands, 3 manuals, and as I already mentioned, a pedal board. We have what's called stops. All of these different buttons on the sides are called stops, and each stop has a different name and a color that goes with that. Think of a color palette for an artist. So the organist has a palette from which to work. And there's lots of other buttons that I'll describe one more for you. So if I'm playing a lot of maybe intricate music where it requires me to switch sounds quickly, I have these things that are called pistons. All these numbered buttons are called pistons. And I can preset the sounds that I want. And so, for example, if I push piston number 1 over here, the lights will go on for the colors that I have already selected. And the 2, you'll see that change, and 3 and 4, etc. The interesting thing, I'm going to show you a couple of the colors on the organ to start. And each week I'll introduce you to a few different colors. Here is something called, and if you attend Mass at St. Gregory, or you listen to the live stream, you'll hear this trumpet sound that I use sometimes called a festival trumpet. And so, okay, so that's an interesting sound. Then there's some, what we call the principal stops on the organ. The principal stops are the foundational stops. It's what we use for hymns. The sounds that really you can't replicate anywhere else. So the first principle is called a principle 8-foot. Now the reason it's called 8-foot, I'm going to give you more information on this in the weeks ahead, but this is an electronic organ, a digital electronic organ. But on a pipe organ, the main stop is called a principal, and it's the pipe, the largest pipe is 8 feet tall. 8 feet tall. So you'll hear a principal 8-foot, a principal 4-foot. Let me show you what happens here. Here's the sound of the fundamental organ sound. That's the 8-foot. Now if I put on the 4-foot principal, you'll hear it an octave higher now. You'll hear the 8-foot sound with an octave higher. So you have that overtone. How about a 2-foot? If I add a 2-foot, you have another octave, so that the largest pipe in that set is 2 feet high. All right, I'm going to show you 2 more interesting sounds on here. Here's oboe, hautbois is an oboe. The oboe sound, kind of similar to what you would hear in an orchestra. The oboe. All right, and one more thing I use a lot, especially during Easter time and for our Alleluia, is the chimes. The chimes. So I'm going to put on, let's see if I can make the chimes. Usually it sounds good with a couple of other stops, so let's throw those on. There you go. Does that sound familiar? Before we play our piece by Bach, before I play my piece by Bach, let me just do a little bit with my feet. Let me do a little bit with my feet so you can see maybe a scale on with my feet. Sorry about that. That was the end of a very difficult Bach piece. So what I would like to do for you now is to play, as I said, Bach's probably most famous work for organ, most iconic, I shouldn't say most famous, but most people would recognize it, the Toccata and Fugue in D minor. A little bit of background on this piece. You will think of it, when you hear it, as being a piece for Halloween. But there was no such thing as Halloween back in Bach's time in Germany. He was born in 1685, died in 1750. And what Bach would do, he would travel from village to village as the expert on organs. And when a new installation was put into a little village church, he would be the expert that would come in and he would check all the bellows and he would check the voicing in the church and he would make sure that everything was just right. So he would test out the lungs of the organ and he would play all kinds of different sounds. And so this piece was likely one that he used in one of these tests for the different organs. So the beginning, toccata, means touch piece, very, very fast, uses all the different colors, all the different levels of the organ, and then it goes into what's called a fugue. And a fugue is sort of like a round, as you would say, row, row, row your boat, where you get a little melody that can be repeated over and be played in different keys and on different levels of the organ. So you'll hear the toccata and fugue in D minor, and keep in mind that it is not a piece for Halloween, but